So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to today's President's Entrepreneurship Lecture. Although this will be much more conversational than lecture-based. This is one of the favorite events that we do on campus because it really brings to life the mission of the Dyer Center, which is to help students ignite exemplary careers through innovation, creativity, and intelligent risk-taking. Under the auspices of this series, we have brought together CEOs, nonprofit and governmental leaders, and community change agents. This diversity of speakers highlights a fundamental point that I often will quote when I'm addressing the campus, and it's that innovation is not endemic to any particular discipline, but is the domain for all who are deeply committed to solving a problem. So I hope today's event inspires some of you to stop into the Dyer Center, introduce yourself, and ask us how we can help you. The Dyer Center is a resource that not many undergraduate liberal arts institutions have. It's a real kind of unique point of distinction for the college, and it would be a shame if more students don't avail themselves of the resources that we have and that we've raised on behalf of you to help you be more successful post-Lafayette. So please stop in and ask how we can help. I'd also like to acknowledge our co-sponsors for today's events. The Department of History, the Department of Computer Science, and the Athletics Department. Thank you. So quickly, I'll just tell you guys a little bit about Bill, and then we'll start off our conversation. So William Bill Wagner leads LogMeIn's long-term market strategy and day-to-day operations as the Chief Executive Officer. He joined the company in 2013, serving as LogMeIn's first ever Chief Operating Officer, and played a key role in the company's rapid growth and expansion to become one of the world's preeminent SaaS providers. Bill was promoted to president in early 2015 and joined LogMeIn's board of directors. Importantly, Bill holds a BA in history from Lafayette College and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. And with that, I'd like to get started.
And played football.
What position?
I was the world's slowest Division I linebacker.
So I'd like to start the discussion by talking a bit about your journey from Lafayette history major to CEO of a big tech company, particularly emphasizing those inflection points and experiences that have helped you get where you are today.
Sure. You said, first of all, I'd like to thank the Dyer Center, the History Department, and the Athletic Department for having me here today. It's really my honor to be able to speak to you and hopefully just share a little bit about my experience. So one of the first things I should just correct is I didn't start off as as a history major. I actually started off as an engineering major. I came out of high school and I was good at math and science, didn't know what I wanted to do, and my parents, who didn't go to college, they were like, well, you should go be an engineer, because that's what math and science people do. So I enrolled as an engineering major, and it just, within a couple semesters, it just wasn't something I really enjoyed. And one of the things about my experience at Lafayette, and I think it's hopefully something you will all take advantage of, is that you'll have these people who come into your life, even if only for a brief moment, and they can make a huge impact. It can be a teacher, it can be a faculty member, it can be an administrator, it could be an alumni. And you're going to have a conversation with them, and it can change your life. So in my case, I had a conversation at a cocktail party with an alum whose name was Robin Amesbury. And Robin was a partner at Arthur Anderson. And he said, Bill, how you doing? And I said, well, I'm not crazy about engineering, but I love the school, and football's fun, and that's all good. And he's like, well, what do you love to do? He's like, when you're an undergraduate, you should do what you love to do. And then you can go to if you want to go to graduate school, and you can figure out what you want to do the rest of your life. But you want to really embrace this experience you have. And that was on a Saturday after a football game. And on Monday, I was on the phone to my parents telling them I switched to become a history major. And of course, my mother, between tears, she said, so I thought you said you don't want to teach. I said, I don't want to teach. She's like, well, what are you going to do with a history major? I'm like, I don't know. And I'll figure it out. And I also had the luxury of having two other people who really influenced my life. Bob Wagner, who was a professor. I think he's on the cover of the Lafayette newspaper this week. He's retiring. And he's probably more than any other person responsible for opening up the world to me and helping me understand there was more to life than the life that I had known kind of coming up out of a blue-collar background in a small town in Pennsylvania. And then the other one was my honors thesis. I moved to history, loved it, ended up doing an honors thesis with Dick Welch. And Dick Welch was a professor, very accomplished professor, and he was my thesis advisor. And the thing I learned from him was humility. Because I was writing my honors thesis and I thought I was uncovering all these great facts about pre-war diplomacy. And of course he knew everything that I had already, that I was uncovering. I'd run into his office like, look what I found this document and it says this and this. And he would never say that he already knew that. But years later, they were like towards the end of my process, I kind of knew that he had already figured all this stuff out. And he was just helping me explore my inner self, my approach to learning. And I'll come back to that approach to learning because I think it's something, if I were to say take one thing away from your Lafayette experience, that's it, is that approach to learning. So like some of you, I came out of Lafayette, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Had a great experience here, both scholastically and also in a lot of different activities, which I think Lafayette affords you to get involved in, which we can talk about if we have questions. But I always loved tech, and at the time, Lafayette had what was called a technical studies minor. So it wasn't quite like an AB of engineering that Lafayette provides, but it was a different minor that was really about the convergence of society and technology, which I graduated in '89. Today, that topic is on the front page. Back in '89, that was not a topic that was really talked about. And so I always loved that convergence of technology and the social sciences. So I went to work for AT&T at the time. And I had advice from someone that said, go work for a big company, let them train you, and then if you want to go back to graduate school, you can go do that. So I worked there for 10 years, started in sales, and went into marketing, and decided I was always curious about what other people were doing. So one thing that was consistent through my career, and I've only worked for 4 companies, but I was always curious about what other people were doing. I wasn't just satisfied. And I don't mean that in a way of trying to get more, just I wanted to do something different. I wanted to keep learning. And so I ended up going back to graduate school. I was fortunate enough to go to Wharton, got my MBA, and then I decided I knew what the big company world was, so I wanted to go work for a startup. So I went to work for a startup in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, about an hour from here. We grew that to from nothing to about 80 million. We sold it to IBM. Then I wanted to work for a public company. I wanted to see what that was about. And so I went to work for a public company, went public in 2006, another software company, and then I came here. I was fortunate enough to come to LogMeIn. We were about $140 million when I joined. Today we're about $1.2 billion in revenue, about 4,000 employees, and my only commercial the whole day, I promise, is you should all use LastPass. If you don't, anyone here use LastPass? If you don't use a password manager, guys, you got to do it. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Go use it, and it'll make your life a lot easier and more secure. But anyway, we make a lot of different kinds of software applications, and I'm fortunate enough to be the CEO. We're a publicly traded company, so we're traded on the NASDAQ exchange, and about 36 offices around the world.
Including a phenomenal space in Boston.
Yeah, great space in Boston, which any of you are in Boston, I'd love to host you. It'd be my pleasure.
What day is the coffee? I happened to catch you on the day when we were able to get the coffee.
Yeah, we have the world's best coffee bar in any company, no doubt. So please come on up and take me up on it.
So in our discussions, you've spoken passionately about students being able to pursue a liberal arts degree without worrying about career prospects afterwards.
Yeah.
When we think about the rising cost of education and increasing global competition, what makes you so confident in that position? Because in many ways it's contrary to kind of what you're hearing more broadly, which is you need to be studying engineering and sciences.
Well, I think the thing about, when I think about history in particular, but liberal arts in general, 2 things that I think that I apply to my job every day. First of all, what you learn in history is that there is no right answer. There is no one right answer. And I think about thinking about engineering versus history and what didn't I like about engineering, what did I like about history, is that there was no right answer. You're just in pursuit of knowledge and trying to get closer to the truth. And as I'm sure Allison would tell you, when you run an organization, I would say 99% of the decisions that you make are in the gray zone. There is no right answer. There are a lot of wrong answers, but no one particular answer that's always right. And history teaches you that. And it also teaches you to appreciate different perspectives. And that is increasingly critical in a global, and especially if I run a global company, 4,000 people, different cultures around the world, all types of the political spectrum, everyone across. I think history gives you a perspective and teaches you to appreciate that smart people can disagree and still be civil and still have a discourse. And it's that pursuit of knowledge, I think, which is much more important than finding the actual answer. And I apply that almost every day in my job.
That's a great answer. That's a lot to think about. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Okay. So outside of everyone converting to becoming a history major, we know that you certainly know a thing or two about innovation. And so from your perspective, what could colleges do to better prepare our students to be change agents and innovators? Because we fundamentally believe at the Dyer Center, and I think that vision is shared by many in the college, that really the next frontier of competition will be in innovation. So what can we do in higher education to better prepare our students?
Well, this is what we call, in my job, this is what we call a softball question. So, I think the Dyer Center is spot on with what you need in terms of innovation. So how we tackle it at LogMeIn is we have a separate innovation team. We have LogMeIn Labs. So we have about 4,000 employees, about 1,100 of whom are software engineers. Outside of what they do, they're working on products all day long. Of course, we have hackathons, which is where they get to work on any product that they want. They get to do anything that they want for a week, a year, and then they compete. And then I get the benefit of being a judge, and we end up funding one team to go build that product. And that product, by the way, it could have nothing to do with the rest of our business. But we also have a separate team, and I think this is where really there's overlap with what you're doing at the Dyer Center. The practice of innovation. There is a practice of innovation that can be applied to any field and any pursuit. And it's a different way to solve problems. There's an agile way of attacking problems that has been demonstrated and proven to be a much more rapid way to move forward, find out mistakes, avoid pursuing mistakes for too long. Pursuing mistakes are great as long as you make them quickly. And so we have an innovation team, and if you have any problem inside our company, the innovation team is essentially like the Dyer Center. Anyone can go there with any problem. And that team will apply their agile methodology and will work with that employee on what that problem is. That problem could be an HR problem. It could be a algorithmic problem for our AI team. It could be a marketing problem. And they will go get in front of customers, they'll go test it, and they'll go push the boundaries in a way that person probably couldn't do without them. So it's kind of an innovation SWAT team, and I would encourage you, no matter what topic you're trying to work on, even if it's like, hey, I'm really struggling in this particular area of college life, taking an agile approach to thinking through that. And I think the Dyer Center is the perfect avenue to go take advantage of that opportunity. And we do it in the corporate world, it's the same model. And we didn't invent it, most tech companies have a very similar model.
But you're also a publicly traded company, and so I'm just wondering if you could speak a bit about those two competing priorities, if you will. So you've got to give your team space and time to innovate and think and try different things, right? But at the same time, you have to meet quarterly numbers, and so you're basically saying, okay, take this 10% or 5%, whatever time it is that you're giving these employees to try different things, to build this culture that it's okay to fail, but at the same time, failure has real consequences when you report quarterly. Yeah. How are you balancing that?
That's a great question, and being a publicly traded company is a real challenge, because we have to report. The way it works is we report our earnings, essentially how we did, we report that to investors every quarter. So every quarter, I get up and I get on a call and I walk through our financials, and they either like or don't like what I have to say, and I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I was the highest performing company in tech, and I've been the lowest performing company in tech, so I've seen both sides of it. One's more fun, for sure, but it's a really important point because as a CEO, our job, and I think, again, Allison's job, and if you're a department head here or you're a football coach, your job is you're investing in the long-term success of your team, your organization. But there is pressure to win. We got to beat Lehigh this year. We got to increase our endowment this year. We have to produce results this quarter. And that is the challenge of leadership. It doesn't matter if you're a public company or a coach or a faculty member or a president. So that is a real challenge. Now, a real specific example of that is in our engineering teams, we actually get about 50% of your time you're working on brand new code, 25% of your time you're working on someone else's code, and 25% of your time is essentially free. That's how we break it up in terms of, that's a very specific thing that we do within engineering, but different departments also have that. But we're also really clear about what our goals are, so everyone knows where we're marching to, so they're not going to be surprised by what it is that we have to accomplish. Just like I had the benefit of talking to Coach Garrett this morning, and just like it's a breakthrough is the theme for the football team, everyone at LogMeIn can tell you what our objectives are this year. I get up and talk about it all the time. I'm a very active communicator and very engaged with employees. Matter of fact, I don't have an office. I move my desk every 3 months. I sit on a different floor of the company. So right now I'm on the sales floor. I'll be moving to the customer care floor next week, and then I'll be on the engineering floor this summer, and then I move to a marketing floor in Q4. So it's a way that I make sure that everyone has not just access to me, but I get a chance to engage with people, and they hear directly from me what it is that we're trying to do. So that's a way that I can give people space, but also make sure everyone understands what our mission is.
That's really interesting. That's a new one I haven't heard either. Okay.
And it's great. The first week when I moved to a different, everyone's like, you guys are all right now, very nice and polite. And like a week later, they forget that they're sitting next to the CEO, and then it's like chaos. And that's when I can really find out what's going on. Like that's when I'm inspired by my employees and what they're doing, and that's when I'm like, really? Is that what we're saying to our customers? So it's a great experience. It takes about a week for it to sink in. Everyone's nice that first week, and then Allison, you have to try that. It's a great experience.
Awesome. So now you've also made some strategic investments in artificial intelligence, specifically the establishment of the AI Center for Excellence. At the Dyer Center, we've done events. We often convene panels and have conversations about artificial intelligence and the future of work. It's something we think a lot about. From your perspective, how will these technologies, automation, impact the future of work and how we have to educate the next generation at places like Lafayette?
This is a super topical question. And not just AI, but technology in a broader sense. I mean, I don't really know if everyone can appreciate technology is transforming and disrupting our economy and our society in a really profound way. Not all good. Not all good. And I think the level of political polarization that we see, a lot of that is driven by dislocation in the economy, because jobs that were the backbone of a middle-class income are now being replaced by technology. My dad was a mechanic. My dad raised 3 kids on a salary of an auto mechanic, and sent at least one to college. I don't think you could do that today. But a lot of the backbone of that is being driven by technology. AI in particular is at the forefront of that change, and is a huge issue right now. Tech companies are really struggling with it. So we opened up our AI Center of Excellence in Israel. We'll have about 70 people there this year. But the issue that companies are struggling with is applied AI, applied machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the role and the ethical issues surrounding that. So matter of fact, and to tell you how early we are in the cycle of thinking through that, and lots been written, everything from Elon Musk calling it as the biggest threat to humanity, to Google, as you know, last week, they stood up their ethical AI organization, and then 10 days later had to shut it down because people were complaining about who was making up that panel. And this is people whose AI technology is affecting you each and every day. And again, back to the liberal arts aspect, as Steve Jobs said, it's not just the technology, it's the humanities. It's the humanities that make it really special. And I said this morning, there's probably no more well-recognized technologist than Steve Jobs, and he recognized the import of the humanities. And I think when it comes to understanding the consequences of what we're doing, technologists can get carried away. And technocratic thinking is dangerous. And I think the humanities, again, that thoughtfulness that I talked about earlier is super important.
And I just want to now pivot a little bit and talk about culture and values, both individually and institutionally at LogMeIn. You have supported closing the diversity gap in tech and igniting the potential of youth from under-resourced communities to propel them for success. How and why did this become such an important issue for you?
So I think it actually started at Lafayette. So one of the things when I would go to class, and I was really, when I first came to Lafayette, I had always gotten by in high school because I was smart enough, but didn't really work that hard, didn't have great study skills. Came to Lafayette, that changes, right? Your freshman year, like, okay, it's just like, things are at a different speed. And I remember I would go to class, and I was really into, by my junior year, I was really now into the academic side of the Lafayette experience. But I remember I would show up, I'd come from practice, and I'd show up, and I'm sure, Coach, you wouldn't allow me to do this anymore, but I would show up in my sweatpants, and my hat would be backwards, I'd be that kid. I'd sit in the back of class, and I remember everyone in class like looked at me and thought, like, you know, football player. And I took that shit seriously, and nothing gave me greater pleasure than being the only person in the class who was able to answer that question, with my hat backwards and my sweats on, and you know, still sweating because I just took a quick shower. And you know, I think I really try to fight stereotypes. And look, I'm a white middle-aged CEO. Like, talk about stereotypes. I am the stereotype. So I think it's really important for me, probably more so than others, to use my position to really advocate for change. And nothing can be, I think nothing, you know, a lot of arguments can be made about where you should spend your time, but nobody can argue about kids and education. Like, all kids should have an access to equal education, and if you're in Boston Public Schools, you're not getting the same education that some of us had. Some people in this room, maybe who were more fortunate, had access to better education. And you know, I'm on a real mission to change that. I feel a special burden because I am who I am, and I do have that chip on my shoulder. I'm still that kid who's sitting in the back of the classroom trying to prove to everybody else that I'm as good or smarter or as smart as anyone else. So that's how it's manifested itself. Awesome.
And so we have a number of seniors in the room, and I know we have our VP of Gateway Career Services in the room, so I definitely want to get to some professional advice here. When you're evaluating candidates with comparable qualifications, right, so they both have 4.0 GPAs or, you know, above 3.5s, they were in a bunch of student clubs, what are the intangibles or kind of non-professional qualities that you look at when trying to differentiate for potential hires?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is I love to look for anything from a leadership perspective. That's always something that I love to see. And leadership doesn't mean you know, president of a certain thing. Leadership can be meaning establishing something for the first time. It can be doing something different. I mean leadership in that sense, not in the sense of an elected office. Number one. Number two is intellectual curiosity. Like, I want to see that the person brings intellectual curiosity every day. And I tell people at my company, I said, if you're ever the smartest person in the room, that's the day you should quit. And I believe that. You need to be put yourself in situations where you can learn from someone the people who are around you. Each and every day. I learn from people on my team. I learn from first level employees. And if you can't, then you shouldn't be in that situation. But that requires that drive to keep learning. And that's a really important trait. The third trait is self-awareness. You have to be self-aware. And matter of fact, I would say from as I recruit executives or work with other executives, that's the number one trait that I see missing. is you have this perception of successful executives that are driven by these A-type personalities, and he or she often kind of running through barriers and no holds barred. That's kind of a myth. That's not really how it works. It's really about people who are self-aware, and servant leaders, I think, are my preferred leadership style. And self-awareness is really, really key. So there's a saying that you've probably heard of, passionate beliefs that are loosely held. You want to believe something really, really passionately, but you don't want to hold on to them so tightly that you can't be wrong. You have to be willing to admit you're wrong. And when I see executives who fail, that's what they fail at. They fail because they believe something, but then they hold on to it. And they want to be right. And that's, again, back to where I started in history, you learn that there is no right. And I think that's why the connection I would make between those two.
I could actually see that. I remember our first meeting, we were a bit early at your office, and but just very welcoming and really just kind of put all of us at ease for the conversation. So I could see how you embody those principles that you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all going to make mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes. But that self-awareness to build on those mistakes and build something out of them and learn from them and not make them again, that's what separates. And whether you're starting out in your career or whether you're a senior executive.
So how do you, and what specifically do you do to continue to develop and grow as a leader?
So I think like a lot of people in this room, I read a ton. I'm sure you hear that all the time. And I seek out new experiences that are outside, and I try to spend time with executives from different companies who are solving different problems. I sit on the board of a couple different companies, and that's one of the great things that I have an opportunity to do, because they face different challenges, it's a different situation. So I'm learning, and I can see how they're tackling a problem differently than I would tackle the problem. And so that's a great way for me to learn. And then, as I had mentioned, I had breakfast with Allison this morning, and I belong to a group of CEOs. And CEO, I was joking that no one really wants to hear your problems as CEO. So the only other people you can really talk to are other CEOs, because then you kind of commiserate a little bit, and it's okay. It's all it's confidential. So I do that. I belong to some different peer groups and across different industries, and I think that's really important, that they're not all just software tech CEOs.
Give us a book recommendation.
I'm reading a great book called Monsters, which is about the influence of technology. It actually traces back to it's a kind of a history book about the Hindenburg.
Surprise.
But talks about the convergence of pathological technology and the influence in our society. It's a really great read. I try to read one. I'm a simultaneous reader, like some of you. So I always read one history book, one business book, and then one just fiction or biography or something like that. So, I'm a slow reader, so it takes me a while to plow through some books.
Well, we'll add that one to the Dyer Center collection. So if anyone's interested in reading that, stop by our center. So I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I'm going to ask one more question before we open it up to the audience for Q&A. What is that piece of advice you leave for our students who are about to start out on their journey to positively impact the world and try to live a life of meaning?
Well, I think there's probably people here who you're surrounded with in Lafayette who are probably better qualified to give advice. I guess I would offer two things. One is, if you're an undergraduate here, one of the things that makes Lafayette special, but certainly for me, is that one-on-one engagement with faculty. And my son's in college, and I've interacted with a lot of different colleges and universities, and I will tell you that is super rare here and so important. It has changed my life, and it's such a great aspect of the undergraduate emphasis of Lafayette, and the small classes, access to faculty. And I would really encourage people to take advantage of that, number one, if you're an undergraduate. As you think about your career, I don't know that I'm going to give you any kind of pearl of wisdom of like, hey, go do this and you'll be successful, because most of you are going to have careers very different from mine. And a lot of you aren't going to have careers where you work for a company. You're going to work for yourselves. That is the, the so-called gig economy is the real future. And that can be scary, but on the other side, companies are changing. So you can go work for Google, for instance, and part-time, and they'll still pay full benefits. You can be a contract worker, and they'll pay for benefits, they'll pay for healthcare. So contract work is becoming much more of a driver of the economy than when I started out. You went to work for a company, and then you stayed there until you got promoted, and then you moved to another company. So that would be one thing to think about. The world's going to be a little bit different. One thing, a mistake that I see people making, especially people who are younger in their career, is moving too quickly, moving around too quickly. So I can't tell you how many times I'll see someone leave a company, could be our company or another company, and for a really small little monetary bump. And you're all in college, and some of you, I'm sure, make money. When I was in college, I had no income, I was broke, I had no money. And like a few $1,000s meant the world to me. But whatever you do, don't make job changes for money. Because over the course of your career, that money's not going to mean anything. Make the job changes for the other reasons that are important to you. Avoid that trap. That is a trap. And when I see people who have made those changes, made those choices, and when I ask them why they made those choices, and they say, well, I got a raise, and blah, 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 like, done. I'm not going to hire them. That'd be a piece of advice, a mistake that I see people making, especially people who are earlier in their career. And I would really encourage you not to make that mistake. You got to stick to it. You got to show grit and determination, and don't make stupid mistakes for money, because it's over the course of your career, that will be the least important thing in your life.
Okay. With that, why don't we turn it to the audience and give everyone a few minutes to ask questions, and then I know Bill will also be hanging around a little bit afterwards before he has to get on the road. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
First of all, thank you so much for coming in. I sort of wanted to ask, you spoke a little bit about working with different teams all across the world. And also,
Sharad, one second. Can everyone hear me? I'll
repeat the question.
Okay.
And then I've also noticed that during your track record there has been quite a few mergers and acquisitions that you've taken in. Can you speak a little bit about, one, that transition of becoming a CEO for a company that's already established, and then two, how do you handle incorporating these new groups and make sure everyone's following the same vision?
So, should come to my staff meeting tomorrow. So the question is, it's really about the M&A piece, right? Is like when we acquire companies. And so at LogMeIn, we've acquired, since I joined, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies. One of which was twice our size. And the question is really, how do you, I guess I'm screwing with the camera here.
No, you're fine.
I'm a standing guy, so. How do you, I would say you hit on the key aspect is culture. Culture, the hardest job, one of the hardest things as the company has grown. So when I joined, we were 400 employees. Today, we'll finish this year just under 4,000 employees. And the key is culture. The key is making sure you have continuity of culture across the organization. And the way that we do that is we have a very structured interview process. So if you're going to get interviewed, we have 350 people in Budapest. If you're going to get interviewed in Budapest, and you're going to get interviewed in our office in Sydney, Australia, or you're going to get interviewed in our office in San Francisco, you're going to get interviewed the same way. And we're going to interview for the cultural traits that we believe are critical to our success. And that is the only way that I know of to really scale culture. Because when small companies start, the CEO usually interviews everybody. And when you're in a startup, and when I was in a lot of companies where I was early in, I'd interview everybody who get hired. Now there's no way I could do that. So the key is having a really rigorous interviewing process and have a culture of communication and engagement. As a leader, you have to engage. So those would be my 2 ways that I do it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Fantastic question.
Thank you.
Bill, what are the traits? What are the traits?
Well, what are the traits? Yeah, so I think we've touched on a couple of them. The biggest one for us is accountability. So people all the time want more empowerment. They want the ability to go make decisions. People always are asking, like, I want to make it, let me make the decision, and Bill, you don't have to make all the decisions, which is great. I don't want to make all the decisions. But the key is that comes at a price, and that price is accountability. And so I would say we have a series of traits that we talk about, but for me, that's the biggest one. We say you have to be accountable when no one is looking. That's the difference. It's easy to be accountable when like you're in a meeting and all your peers are there, your boss is there. But when you walk down the stairs and it's the end of the day, you pick up the trash, that piece of trash is sitting on the floor because you care that much about the company. Are you accountable to, if you make a decision, you own up to it if it doesn't work out well? And so we had an employee who made essentially a spreadsheet error, basically, but a really important one. It will cost us millions of dollars. And that employee has shown great promise, has done great things for us, and I'm not going to fire that person. That person's never going to do it again. He was accountable. He came to his boss, and then they came to me and was like, look, I screwed up, I own this, and man, that goes a long way. If I had found out and he wasn't accountable, then there probably would have been consequences. And so that accountability throughout the organization means that therefore I don't have to make all the decisions. And that's not how you can't run a company when one person's making all the key decisions. So accountability, Coach, that would be the one that I talk about most often.
Bill, you and I have known each other for a little while now, and I want folks to leave here, and you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but a lot of what you talked about, you can see on a resume sometimes, you can allude to it, but there's some stuff on your resume that I know about. You walk the walk when you talk about diversity, paying things forward, making the world a better place. If you don't mind, you've done some pretty impressive things in your lifetime that I think are important to you. So again, you don't have to, but
well, thank you. That's kind of you. What I would say is it's important to get out of your comfort zone and to pay back, and that's a really important thing. So I have some certain things I'm passionate about. I talked about education. I'm on the board of a program that reaches into Boston Public Schools and runs an entrepreneur series with Boston Public School students where they get up and they run their own business. And these are businesses that are like a cell phone case or kind of a funky hat. These are, they're not changing the world. And these are kids who are 12 to 14 years old. But one of them becomes CEO, one becomes CFO, one becomes the VP of marketing, and they end up getting up and presenting. And last year I was a judge, the former governor was a judge, and to see the transformation of these kids who are really coming from backgrounds where they just don't have a lot of privilege or even the kind of support that a lot of us depend on. That's something which I'm passionate about. But I think the bigger thing is it is important for all of us to have our elements that we're, I'm totally uncomfortable, John, so you just screwed me up. I talk all the time, I talk to investors who are worth billions of dollars, and I can't even answer that question. But anyway, I don't want to talk about myself, but it's...
If anybody's interested, come and see me later.
Yeah.
You talk about identifying kind of characteristics to recruit into your company. As you surround yourself with talent, specifically at your executive and your leadership team, how do you think about mentoring and leadership pipeline development within your organization? How do you identify those superstars that you want to be a part of your executive team, and how do you mentor them to the point where they can go off and be accountable? And so identifying leaders within the group that are already there and how to empower them.
Yes, the question is really how do we identify and then develop the leaders, the emerging leaders in our business. So it's we really believe, I'm sure a lot of you in this room believe, it's not just in the what you do, it's in the how you do it. So we grade every employee in the year along two different vectors: what you did and how you did it. And then at a certain level, everyone gets 360 feedback. So we ask your colleagues, so we don't just take your word for it or your boss's word, but we ask all your peers, and they'll rate you on not only what you did, but how you did it. And I'll tell you, that is a really telling exercise. And then we develop we put a lot into training our managers. So in a lot of companies, and some of you will work in companies, you'll end up working for somebody. We all work for somebody. Even Allison, even I work for somebody. I have a board of directors I work for. So we put a lot of effort into first level managers because being someone who does the job every day and then being someone who manages people who do the job are two very different skill sets. Very different skill sets. So we put more resource in training first level managers than any other part of our business, including executive training, anything. It's all on first level managers because they touch the vast majority of our workforce.
Are there any more questions? It's almost 1 o'clock, and I know a lot of folks have class. Will, I know, has a few moments to stay around afterwards, but I want to make sure if there's any more student questions, we're able to ask them before we wrap this up.
So, I know a lot of us are considering graduate school, especially MBAs. Can you speak a little bit about that experience going to Wharton, and do you think it's still a valuable experience?
Yeah, so the question is, thanks for the question. It's about the role of graduate school and how I think about it. So yeah, I did go to Wharton, and I went 10 years after I graduated from Lafayette. So it was about 10 years. I was working full time. I think it depends on what you want to do. So for me, I got to a point in my career where I was starting to get more responsibility, and I was starting to spend more time with financial types. So I knew a lot about sales and marketing. I didn't know anything really about finance. I mean, I took a few courses here, but that was the extent of my real knowledge. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to sit across the table with people who are using these terms like EBITDA and cash flow margins, and I'm like, well, I don't really know what's going on here. So that was really my motivation. It's like, I need to go back to school if I'm going to keep going. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do where you don't need graduate school. I get asked all the time, so we have a person who runs our sales organization. He probably has about 800 people who work for him. I couldn't tell you where he went to school. I couldn't tell you what his degree was. Actually, he was a math major. But he didn't go to graduate school, and I get asked often by people like, how important is it that I go to graduate school? And I think it depends. I think it really depends. If you don't know something and that you feel you need to do what you want to do, like I did, then it's great. But I don't think, for the most part, you're not going to get disqualified for jobs, most jobs, because of where you went to school, because of your grade point. I mean, some people may not let me say that, but your grade point average. Like after your first job, like it matters more what you're doing than your academic record, or even where you went to school. And so I think that's true. Most times I don't even get to the second page. I'm at a stage where people who I interview have 2-page resumes. I very rarely even get to the second page because I want to know what they've done in the last 5 years. That's much more important to me than where they went to school or anything along those lines.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks everybody. I know you guys. Oh yeah, one more question, please.
So you were talking about a healthy timeline and not getting like too steadfast with moving on to a new job.
Yeah.
So would you say that like you, for example, you find your first job after college and realize that it's really not a good fit for you, you don't really like it, and you're not very happy or comfortable with your first job? How long would you say is a good time before like you kind of give them the feeling that this isn't working out or that you need to move on and look for something new?
Yeah, so terrific question, which is about how long is long enough, especially if you're not happy or you don't think the job's the right fit for you. And of course, there's no one answer to that question. Like first of all, if you're just absolutely miserable, then pull the chute, get out. So that, let's put that aside, because that's the question. I always tell people, like, everyone gets 1 or 2 screw-ups in your career screw-ups in your career. And over the course of, 30, 40 years, you're gonna make some bad choices. And so if you get 1 or 2 of those, like, no big deal. No big deal. But if I interview someone and I see, like, they're 5 years out of school and they're on their 3rd company, like, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. So just be aware of it, weary of it. And I tell people, when you make a career decision, think about what happens if it doesn't work out. Because you're going to make decisions, you're going to make choices, and some of them aren't going to work out. Maybe the CEO's crazy. Maybe the company gets acquired. Maybe something else happens. So think about where are you, like, and I mean even geographically. Am I somewhere, so if you're in tech and you go work for a company in, I'm gonna offend somebody in the room, I'm sure. But if you wanna go work for a company in a tech company, you wanna be in tech and you decide you're gonna go work for a company in Norman, Oklahoma. Like, okay, I hope that works out, because there's probably not a great tech sector around that. Now, if you want to go to work for tech, you go to Boston, you go to New York, you go to Austin, Texas, you go to San Francisco. It doesn't work out? Okay, lots of other opportunities in that area. You want to be in healthcare, same thing. Go to Boston, go to Philadelphia, lots of different jobs. I think it's okay to move. But don't take, what you don't want to be is a serial jumper. And your first job out, there's no right timeline. I think if it's not the right job, I think you can move on pretty quickly. But just be thoughtful about that next job, because what you don't want to do is have 2 or 3 of those in a row. Having 2 or 3 spread out over 30 years, no problem. Having 2 or 3 in a row, then the question is going to be like, okay, is this person really able to make a commitment to me as an employer? And so that would be the warning I would give.
Okay, and with that, I ask everyone to join me in thanking Bill.